And I did share with Reed, and perhaps we'll share with the rest of the group, that the challenge is because meetings are posted, so far in advance, and the agendas, and to make sure that the public is aware, we have to stick with that course of action. If we decided yesterday to change to a meeting in person today, that would really throw a monkey wrench into things for staff and for any members of the public who might want to join us. So we have to stick with the plan.
I believe Scott is presenting today, Scott Gooch. Whoever is running this, I know that because Scott has hearing issues, what we've started to do at the MCOC meetings, there is a transcript function within Zoom, which if it turned on, actually will do an automatic transcript of the Zoom meeting. It's actually a brilliant function that we only discovered a couple of months ago. So I don't know if that's possible or not, but it certainly assists him with doing Zoom meetings and things like that. So.
Yeah, well, the other thing, because my husband's just lost all of his hearing now. So he only has the one cochlear ear, and that's made it much more difficult. But Bluetoothing it into your ear is really the only way he can hear Zoom meetings or anything that comes electronically.
Look, there is a live transcript function that's offered through Zoom, and it'll actually it's like subtitles at the bottom, like a movie.
Yeah, it's like the TV or the Netflix. Yep. You can just put in your subtitles, so that helps with the whatever other transmission you get.
So at the top of my screen right now, it says live transcription closed caption has been enabled, and I've just got the little question: who can see this transcript? So I can see that.
I see it too.
Good. You might just advise Scott when he gets on that is available. He has used it in the past.
Great.
Oh, and actually, yeah, at the bottom it has the live transcript show subtitle. Yep. So it's activated.
Good.
Isn't that interesting? I can't see it here. I wonder if I have to change the view.
At the bottom of my screen, Evelyn, where it goes down and it does the different mute, unmute, and the very far right, it has where it has record. The next one I have.
Oh, right. Yes.
There.
Show subtitle. Gotcha.
Oh, that's
excellent.
Great. Well, hey, thanks, Rob. We
all learned something, Rob. Thank you.
We old dogs still have a few tricks up our paws.
That's great. That's great. Janet, have we heard from Jennifer?
No, I don't see that she's joined yet, and I have not heard from her. I will continue to monitor my emails in case something comes in.
Okay, but we are fine for quorum?
Yes,
There's
you are.
Jen.
Yes, you are fine for quorum.
Jen's there.
Oh, here she's coming in now.
Great.
I was there, but nobody could see me.
Oh, you were hiding.
I was, yeah, I don't know. I had to rejoin as a panelist or something.
Oh, right. Yeah, I had to do that too.
Okay, but you're with us now, Jen, and that's
yes.
Wonderful.
I just turned my video on.
Great.
There.
There you are. Okay, so it is 3:02, and I think we will call this meeting to order. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. And as has been mentioned, we do hope this will be our last Zoom meeting and that we can resume in-person meetings going forward. So anyway, again, thanks all of you for being here with us. And we'll begin with a moment of reflection. Thank you. I'm sure all of us the same. All we could hear was the wind. It's really howling out there. And next on our agenda, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or interest of any nature around the table today? And recognizing if anything arises, you may declare at that point in time. Thank you. Number 4 is public participation, and I will read this just for any members of the public who may be listening. Members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released. Presentations are limited to 10 minutes and deputations are limited to 5 minutes. The public is currently unable to attend committee meetings due to provincial restrictions. If a member of the public wishes to make a deputation on an agenda item, they may do so remotely via phone or internet. Members of the public wishing to make a deputation must register with legislative services in advance by 4 p.m. on February the 15th prior to today's meeting by contacting the deputy clerk at deputyclerk@meaford.ca or 538-1060 extension 1100. And the public may watch this meeting via the YouTube channel at meaford.ca/YouTube. So today we have 2 public presentations, which is great. And the first one is from Chamber President Scott Gooch and Kimberley Rogers, and they're going to talk to us about Christmas on the Bay. And I see Kimberley and Scott are both with us. So whenever you two are ready, I'll turn the floor over to you. And there you go, you're sharing your slides. Perfect. So we're looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, good afternoon. I apologize for those of you who've seen this perhaps more than once, but there it is. I'll also know I do need those closed captions because everybody's on their computers right now and the internet where I am is horrendous. I can't hear anybody clearly. Right, so we know right now that most people buy for price. If they're shopping just on price, they're probably going to go on the internet. But people will still spend money and will travel considerable distances for an experience, right? The difference between takeaway and dining out, or dining in, I guess, in a restaurant. And what we want to do is we want to leverage that. Right now, Meaford has on Christmas, the first weekend of December, we've got this great array with the Santa Claus parade, and their stuff goes on at the Meaford Library, and they got Santa's Grotto, and they hot chocolate and window unveiling and dancing windows. We have all this stuff going on, and we actually have a lot of local residents who attend that event. But what we want to do is we want to make the event bigger. Take what's there now, anchor it with an outdoor market with wooden stalls and bar and entertainment stage and ambiance with lots and lots of lights. Then add a bunch of programming to it to make it an event big enough and noticeable enough that once aggressively marketed, people will travel. It'll become a destination. It's worth driving. As you know, I love that byline. There's the Hyde House in Acton. It's worth the drive. They've been using that since I was a wee kid. And that's exactly what we want to achieve here. We think we have something really special in Meaford. We think we have a lot of really great community organizations that already do bits and pieces that can contribute to this effort if they're not already doing it. I would suspect and suggest disproportionate to our population. We have far more active community groups, and just to manage a question of harnessing that potential and that capability, enabling it, assisting them, coordinating a bit, and then putting on this really spectacular event that will be both a community builder for a number of components of society, but also an economic driver within the BIA by bringing people in and taking all their money. Okay, next slide, please. Right, so this is what we want to do. What we want to do is create that 4-day annual outdoor market, not just this year, but this year being the first of many, many years. And what we want to do is weave all those bits and pieces together and make sure it's completely inclusive. So many markets, they focus on vendors and vendor stalls, and that's great, especially if you're a really big city like Quebec City or Toronto or Bath or Cambridge, where you already have a super large organic foot traffic. You just want to steal some more of their money and create a nice experience. What we want to do is we want to make it truly inclusive. No barriers to, in any way, physical, mental, what have you. And to create programming to facilitate that, so actually we draw in some of these groups and provide something to those groups. Just not pay lip service, not just put them in the window, not give them a discount or something, but really provide and target so that everybody from the wee kids up to the elderly and everybody in between as something fun they want to go to, and the whole family can participate in. Of course, it's got to be dog friendly. I complain sometimes that we say we're dog friendly, but don't always walk the walk. Lots of outdoor markets are, well, precisely because they're outdoor. And I think we really focus on that. So in other words, take what we have already, take our strengths, build on them, use what we have, and create something much bigger than, quite frank, anybody has for about 150 kilometers. Okay, next slide. So this is what we're looking at doing visually. So the idea is that we anchor the market. The market itself will be located in Market Square. It's a wonderful location. It's high visibility from Highway 26, Sykes. People driving by, even if they aren't aware of the market, once it starts going up, especially once it's running with the lights, they're going to be aware. They can stop, they can look. They're driving through Meaford to get to Owen Sound, or Owen Sound to Collingwood. They see it, and now they can insert it into weekend plans, even if they weren't already aware. I've been to a number of markets across the world, and I spent a fair bit of time this year looking at some closer to home. And what I really like about the Quebec market is an intimate space, which I think is perfect for Meaford. We want to start with 16 stalls because they're very capital intensive. This is the biggest hurdle to get the wooden stalls going. But you need that intimate space for a number of reasons. One of, if you haven't got 10,000 people filling the auditorium, 6,000 looks like it's vacant. Same thing. If you have an intimate space, you can have 30 or 40 people and it feels crowded, and people are drawing the crowds. It's something about human just evolution. We like crowds with other people. It's why we like social events. So we create that intimate space. We have a bar, an outdoor bar, nothing indoors here. And we have a stage, which both will have a roof to keep the snow off and the weather off, the worst elements off, but they're still outdoors. So a person can come in with their family with a couple outdoor fire pits. You know, maybe the little kid has gone down to the Meaford Library. We want to put on some really good kids programming, not just Saturday, but throughout the market. Then the older ones, because they're grumpy, they want to just sit and get some food and sit by the fire and pretend they're unhappy, but they aren't. I raised 6 kids, 11 grandkids. I know they're all the same. And then we've got maybe some activity on the stage at the right times. Otherwise, there's background music over the speakers that already exist. But mom and dad, or one or the other, can grab something from a bar, mulled wine, mulled cider, or something else. And then they can walk around. We want it so they can walk around that space, full of light, full of ambiance, outdoor fires going, and enjoy that. And that is absolutely possible with a letter from council, is decreeing that it's an event of municipal significance. And that gets attached to the application for the alcohol permit, which is something we rarely see here. But again, it's people come and they want to be in that space. Yes, we got other stuff going on. We want to have hay wagon rides at prime times. Lots of other ideas are coming out. Stalls with high quality local goods on offer, and local is as local as possible. The emphasis has to be first on quality, preference given to local vendors, but you can't sacrifice one for the other. So naturally, it might extend with a broad array of items in each of those vetted stalls. They're all submitted in the application. But again, it's all centered in one area. So many communities like dispersing it. Well, we can have this at the community center because it's cheap and easy, and we can put this over there. What you do is dilute the effect. You don't create the energy and the atmosphere that people are coming for. Again, they'll buy cheap local or on the internet. They'll drive for the wonderful experience. So this is what we want to achieve. Imagine you're going in downtown. You want to go to a restaurant with your family, your friends, your wife, your husband, whatever it is. You come an hour early, you spend half an hour in the market, purchase, wander about, and then go, or conversely, afterwards. You're going to Meaford Hall for the show Friday night. You come an hour early because we made sure you knew about it, and you spend your time there. So again, we're leveraging all of that. And then by creating additional programming, we want to, again, bring more people in. Not everything will happen in this space, but this is where the magic will occur. And then there'll be additional things very close. Of course, we're hoping the BIA, and we're strongly encouraging the BIA. If we build it and the BIA does nothing, they won't really leverage or realize the real opportunity. And it will also conversely or simultaneously undermine the impact of the market. So we really need BIA to buy into the window lighting and all the nice things and put on specials and events, all of which will be marketed through our internet site, along with the normal routes that they normally do that. We want to have a taste of Meaford, where local items are put into gift baskets, suitable gift baskets, high quality items. We buy at wholesale, we sell at a fair value, and it's a little bit of a revenue stream, but we work with a charity on that, whatever. The point being, again, marketed on the internet site, available to purchase also at the market, showcasing what's on offer, primarily Meaford, but then a little bit further down the road, and there where we need to fill the gaps regionally. Has to be quality, has to be experience. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, money. And money is always a thing. You can see first year I put it in red, so we're not hiding anything. We want to add 4 stalls a year for 4 years to get it up to 28. That's the objective, and that's the budget. We think at 5 years, if all goes well, we'll be breaking even. Now I know truth is the more you make, the more you spend to make it more magical. You start buying more things, you upscale stuff, but this is where we're at right now. That's a big number. And Kimberley, who's in charge of sponsorship on the committee, she's got tons of great experience on this, lots of experience, lots of ideas, lots of energy. We think it's absolutely doable. But when you look at that number, you know, we're not doing this without taking it seriously. We've already got an internet site being built. It has to be done professionally. But this is completely, I think it's completely doable. What we're looking at right now is obviously we want community buy-in. In May, I'm looking at having, when I get back from England, we're looking at having a public information session with all the community groups, nonprofit, charitable, and otherwise, who are either interested or want to become involved. And we're going to talk ideas, and we're going to talk about groupings and tasks and who can do what and all that, although some of that work has already begun. But we really need to get some people who could be on the steering committee to lead this. Everybody I know, because I don't live in town, are pretty much on the chamber or pretty much sitting here right now. So we're hoping that people can see something they like off this list and jump on it and put their hand up and then do some work. We're probably going to meet monthly until we get close to the event, and then weekly. And of course, there's always work to be done between the two. There's lots of coordination, lots of things. There are lots of good ideas out there. We just got to pull this together. Yeah, and hopefully I'm looking at Sonia pointing me to something yesterday, so I'm going to start looking at a grant opportunity. I got an information session tomorrow. But generally speaking, the grants really open up after 2 years. They want to see you've got a bit of a track record, which always makes it particularly difficult when you're starting out, especially because nobody wants to give you capital funds. So that's okay. We get money for programming. That frees up other things for capital expense. Next slide. So before we jump into questions, I'm going to ask Kimberley, because she sees things, obviously, the beauty of having a committee is they see from different perspectives, and I always miss stuff. So if Kimberley can jump in and start adding the bits I always forget, I really appreciate that.
Thanks. And thanks for inviting us and letting us speak to you. Although I think we've spoken to a few people already on here. So thank you again. And thanks, Scott, for the vision. We know it's a big undertaking, and that our first stop and the foundation of doing this is making sure that we have an executive committee that has things like market setup, decor, ambiance, entertainment. So we have about 6 more spots that need to be filled on the committee to get it up and going off the ground. And then the second big piece to that, obviously, is the fundraising. And I'm the fundraising sponsorship lead on that. The idea will be that I build a committee that helps me expand. We've already got a sponsorship package. Janet, I did send it to you, I think, last week, along with the executive summary. It's a fluid draft document at this point right now. I think Scott and mine and people that we've talked to, Perry Taylor is another one that's come on board for the committee for decor and ambiance. So really changing the look of that market. Is we really want, our passion is about people stopping, shopping, and staying in Meaford. So it really is about bringing revenue, not just to the market, because I think the big payoff, and Scott, we both agree on that, will be for the BIA shops that are down in the downtown core. And even for inclement weather, we get asked that pretty often. Like, what happens if it snows? That's a good thing. Snow is our friend. It drives shoppers into the downtown shop. So the next step, Scott has diligently gone out and talked to BIA and Trevor and getting that support, because the stores, the restaurants have to be open during that time. And when you initially look at it, 4 days, and that's our foundation planning. And even with the executive summary that I sent to Janet, like, that's a foundation planning. That doesn't mean things won't change over time, but it's not 4 full days. It's Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon, all day Saturday, etc. So we've looked, I think we've done some pretty detailed research on this. I can't count the number of times that we've had coffee together, which has been great. But we really would like your support, welcome your questions, direction. And I just think it's time to, put Meaford on the map with, like, stay after the Christmas parade, come before the Christmas parade, shop in our local downtown core, and to become a feature that's available the first week in December. That's where we are now.
And
Questions?
Kimberley?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. And over to you, Evelyn.
A couple of questions I had was, what efforts are there in getting some of these other than downtown-based businesses to participate? Are you
I think,
looking for?
I think it's intentional. It's intentional marketing. I think our tendency is to use the word aggressive, but to be quite honest, it's intentional marketing. So it just doesn't stay in the downtown core. So somebody that's a vendor that has handmade products, or maybe maple syrup, may want to become in one of the stalls. So really, it is about intentional marketing. So it's not just the small, it's like the shotgun effect. And that's what we're working on, and developing websites, developing digital marketing scopes. That's at the beginning of where we're looking at now.
I will admit that Kimberley is much more up on all the current terminology. Remember, I got 3 decades as a combat soldier and as a scientist. So we do things aggressively and with certitude and convincingly, and yeah, she uses the right words, but yeah. The 4-day, I just want to bring up, and I always do, Kimberly's mentioned it, the 4-day, we do need to recall that, we get 2 sides. Well, 4 days is awful long. And then someone says, yeah, but what do you do when it's pouring down rain or a snowstorm? Well, that's where 4 days is. That's your depth, temporal depth, right? You put all your eggs in 1 day, and then you got really shitty weather. All that money got spent. It's no cheaper to run it 1 day, 4 days, 6 days. Not really. So, yeah. And Evelyn, and I admit, I'm hearing almost nothing, and closed caption's great, but not that great. So I don't always understand the question. Yeah, what we need to be careful. It's like the market must be treated like a website. You never send people away because they probably don't come back. So businesses that aren't downtown, I think Kimberly addressed this, more than welcome. There are no bad ideas right now. I'm willing to take anybody wants to put an effort in something. I'm willing to look how we can bring it in and incorporate it. But what we will not do is say, yeah, go 3 kilometers down the road, go look at this, and then come back, because they're not going to come back.
My feeling is they will come down to become part of this core within the market. I guess the other thing is there's some logistics. So when you're fundraising for the, obviously to build the structures and all that, what's their reusability for other functions, so that people realize they're donating to something that's going to maybe enable more of these types of things? Because you're creating you're creating a bunch of structures for people to be in the center, right?
Yes.
If
Go
I
ahead.
understand on the structures,
What's your
and what I didn't, Yeah, sorry. And what I did mention was obviously, I think Janet and I've been speaking to Janet about this for over a year now. We had our first meeting last summer. She's done a lot of speaking with the municipality staff, Rob Armstrong. And so this cannot happen without municipal support. It wouldn't even be, we wouldn't be here today if they weren't willing to support. Because no municipality or city can run this without, it can't occur there without their support. Now these stalls will be dismantleable. In other words, you can take them apart because we cannot store 8x8 sheds, 7x8 sheds. I mean, they take a lot of space, even taken apart. Once they exist, though, there's always scope for other, and people have already been knocking at my door. Yeah, when you build stalls, we want to use some for event X, Y, and Z. I don't have a problem with that. Now, we haven't come to that bridge, and we haven't put a thought into the municipality's keen on that as well, because once we invest, it's not going to be free, however, because first off, the market organization makes no money. We're not making money on this. We just want our objective is to break even and have a successful event. The second bit is when you take things in and out of storage and put it up and take it apart, there's wear and tear. So obviously, and then from municipal side, they might want to have a fuel cost. I don't know, however they manage it. So they will be there for other organizations to use. I'm totally open to that. Why not? But obviously, real costs have to be covered.
Absolutely, Scott. And just one thought on the what you're talking about now with the stalls, and then over to Rob for a question. I'm wondering if there's any potential for partnership with Georgian College to build the stalls, thinking of their carpentry and trades program, and whether there's an opportunity to talk with them about using this as a possible project through one of those classes. Over to Rob and then Reid.
Oh, thank you, Shirley. Yeah, and again, so Scott and I have talked about this a fair amount, and I'm a big proponent and fan and think it's a great idea. I will say, Scott and Kimberley, that we discussed this at the Meat for Culture Foundation, and I was at the BIA meeting this morning, and it's funny how the same concerns permeate both entities. This is a very large endeavor when you look at your proposal, and it's well laid out. To the point, I think that there's a lot of fear factor involved with it. And I just encourage you to make sure that this has to be a communal effort, municipal, your efforts. A lot of the different groups obviously have to be involved, but they have to be made very clear that that's how it's going to work, is by group participation, because everybody's looking at this right now. And I've heard many people, not many, I've heard various people say, I'm not sure how Scott's going to pull this off. And I keep saying it's not Scott pulling this off. He's the ringleader that has to make a lot of things come together. And that is going to have to really be put forward, because I think people just see the magnitude and they run away screaming.
I'm glad you raised that, Rob. It's a good point. Because for me, I see it's easy. Now, my background, I've done a lot of collaborative planning. I've worked in a lot of military operations, but also events, Pan Am Games, Special Olympics. And in my role with the British Army as a senior operational planner, I worked with other nations and their governments and their domestic politics, be all rolled in. I'm used to working with large, complex, diverse organizations. And as Rob suggested, the key to this is not me doing it all, because I can't. The key is taking all the different groups that do really good things right now, and then bringing them into the fold and letting them do it. So I'm really, and we, the committee, we provide direction, but we enable the existing groups to do what they do best. For example, so I put the paid stage up. I know we still got some talking to do, but TD Bank indicated their interest in sponsoring at least some of the entertainment. We put the stage up, but I go to Beautiful Joe and say, Beautiful Joe, I got a stage. What do you think you could do for dog-related events that you can host on that stage? And I'm thinking 20 minutes, because if it's really bad weather, people will drink the wine in 20 minutes and probably want to move on or go where it's warm. And the performers don't want to spend more than 20 minutes maybe. But how about a dog ugly Christmas sweater competition? I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm open to anything, but it's not me organizing. It's not me now finding volunteers and finding out who owns dogs. I go to Beautiful Joe and say, Beautiful Joe, you're dog people. Come up with some ideas. Have some fun. They come back to me and say, this is what we'd like to do. This is what we'll need from the steering committee to make it happen. And we come up with a plan. It's like, away you go. And then I talk to the next person. They got something else. I go, the amateur theater group in Woodford, maybe they come down. Or the high school theater group, they've got a 20-minute Christmas skit or something. You know what I mean? I'm not writing the script. I'm not hiring the actors. I'm just going to all these groups that we have and say, tell me what you can do with this opportunity. Tell me how we can help each other. I'm meeting with local charities and regional charities. I'd like to find an umbrella charity to take some of the coordination, not to offer just what we have, but I want to offer specialist programming, both at the market and in the library. But I'm not the charity guy to do it. What do I know about charities? I give money. I don't know about that. But there are organizations out there in the community that know this. They live this. They breathe it. I just say, I'm going to enable you. You tell me what you can achieve. Here's a window. Tell me what you need. Go away and do it. And we make it happen. That's why it's easy.
Your passion, Scott.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And just
I have a question and then Jen. Sorry, Kimberly.
I just want to interject for a second, Robert, that I really appreciate you saying that. We have had that feedback, and that is all going to be a consideration, because if we don't get the platform executive as the foundation, it would not move forward. And also with the May, like as Scott had said, with the May community meeting, that'll be an indicator, kind of the taking the temperature to see if it's workable. Because you're right, a committee of 8 people can't pull it off. It has to be a collaboration, and that takes a strong committee. So I think that's the first step. The second step is checking in with the community to see what they can do. And then it would be a decision of, okay, where do we go from that? Because I mean, it's not a foreign concept or a foreign idea with what you have said. So I appreciate you indicating that for sure.
Thank you. Reed?
Thank you. First of all, let me applaud both Scott and Kimberley for bringing this forward. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I've visited many markets. I'm thinking particularly of the one in Toronto in Nathan Phillips Square, and they've done an amazing job. And it's like a European Christmas kind of festival where you move from booth to booth. There is entertainment, and I just think it can become an annual event that is one that's looked forward to. So I think it's a great idea, and it's a great stimulator for economic benefit for a community like ours. I just encourage a couple of things. Somebody mentioned about businesses that are not in the downtown core. I think the experience in Toronto was that they got major sponsors, anchors, shall you say, and Loblaws was one. So like, we can't ignore the Your Independent Grocery. You can't ignore Knights. You can't ignore McDonald's. Let's use the ones that maybe aren't downtown, but they're anchors in our community, and they should have some presence there. I also think that we've got a really good harvest and craft festival. That could be packaged so that there's a discount for some of those vendors if they can do the 4 days. And I would leverage what we have already, because some of those are great events. We have busloads of people come in and tour those, and those are one day or one weekend. 4 days, I think we got some opportunities to really build on. So again, I applaud the effort. I think it's, obviously the devil's in the detail, but I think this is a great start.
Absolutely, Reed. Totally agree. And just one quick thought, and I'll go to you, Jen. Thinking of the scarecrow invasion being sort of our major economic driver, big draw to Meaford, perhaps a couple of Christmas type scarecrows, Santa's a scarecrow or something along that line to tie that major event into the Christmas market, just a thought. And Jen, you had some comments.
Yeah, hi. This is a great idea. I'm really excited, Scott and Kim. I don't think I've had a chance to meet you yet, but my background is in sustainability and marketing, and I'd be happy to integrate some of that into the event. So I guess my question was around, well, a couple of things, but you mentioned that you were looking for some more committee members and what the commitment for that was, and how often you meet and so forth.
Well, to begin with, we're going to start in April and meet once a month, leading up to about 5 weeks out. That it would be probably a weekly meeting commitment on that. So things like just when we're reviewing the committee, like market setup, entertainment, fundraising, decor, volunteer. So those are kind of the main areas. And then there would have to be representation from the BIA, because that's the buy-in too, that we'd have to have a rep from the BIA on the committee so they can include who's involved, who's going to work the same hours, who's open, what specials do they have, whether it's, a special in a restaurant or a store, etc. And Reed, just getting back to yours, thank you again for your comments. So that sponsorship package looks at presenting sponsors, illuminating sponsors, joy-filled Christmas sponsors, etc. But it is the idea that those bigger shops would be able to funnel money in there, and it's ROI, return on their investment, whether it's signage or whether it's a band that they sponsor and signs go up, a banner and website design. So we've really broken that down to what they get back for the return on their investment. And so far, I believe, Scott, we're at 10,000. 65,000 is a big number for a smaller, I don't want to say town, but a smaller town, even though we're big geographically. So, I mean, we have to keep that in mind as well and moving forward with that, and what type of sponsors that we can outreach. But I think Scott said there's 156 that are on the chamber or labeled on the chamber. So it's about an active, planned sponsorship / fundraising committee. It's got a lot of legwork to do.
And my other question / point, I guess, is what, as you move forward with this, trying to consider something that will differentiate you from the other markets that you might be competing with. On the plan, I didn't see anything in relation to food. Is that going to be integrated into some of the stands?
Okay, yeah, so, and again, I missed much of that. So generally your stalls, you can divide them in a number of categories, but food is one of the 4 primary categories. You try to have a balance of crafts, arts and crafts, clothing and jewelry, food. I always forget them. But anyhow, you try to have an array, but food is part of it. And of course, it's the food that people, it's not sit down food. Because if it's bad weather, especially, nobody wants to sit down. You want them to buy it and walk around with it. So things that tend to do really, really well are warm, starchy foods. Drinks that do really well are hot chocolate, mulled cider, and mulled wine. It's warm things, right? It's cold. What do? You get a warm something. Food trucks sometimes come up, and I'll be blunt, I'm not keen on food trucks, but I will adapt as required. Food trucks have the ambiance of, they don't have ambiance. There are certain advantages, but there are many disadvantages. So yeah, that was the bit on the stalls and the composition. I think there was another bit in there too. I didn't quite catch.
Yeah, and just the differentiation between other markets. And one thing I was thinking of is, I don't know, in terms of space or availability, but having something for the kids to be able to do as well. And this is something like longer term, one thing that we're missing in Meaford is like a good outdoor rink, or, some sort of anchor in terms of winter activities. So there could be little games or something that the kids might be able to play outdoors.
Well,
yeah.
as I tell people, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. So, people have ideas, I'm willing to listen. Yes, we want to have. So what's different with this market? Most markets, the bigger ones that we know well, the difference is they have really high organic traffic, and they simply put a market stall to increase that a bit. And you do need to have, the market must be located where there is organic traffic during regular hours. You can't put it somewhere and people will come. It doesn't happen. Having said that, Quebec City, they put stalls across from Chateau Frontenac. It's like, well, of course people are going to go. So one of the big differences we want to have is absolutely, when I say all demographics, deliberately targeting and having activities and things that appeal to all demographics. Most markets don't do that. Everybody thinks about the Christmas stalls, but they're missing the point. If you wanted to be a family destination, something that appeals to all 6 cluster groupings, then you need to have something for all that holds their attention. So yes, the library is great, and they're already starting to work on programming and thoughts of what they want to put on for the market. They already have some of the stuff they've done annually, but I'm serious looking at a disadvantaged group in the community, having deliberate, 3-4 hour targeted programming for them, activities, maybe an extra afternoon of horse wagon rides. I don't know, I'm open ideas, but that's what we're doing different. This is not a Christmas market as purely an economic driver for the BIA, and that's what they normally are. This is a Christmas market that is an economic driver, but also that builds on the community, keeps every aspect is always compared to standard, and how does it get back? What can we do? Doesn't mean we're giving money because we don't have money to give, but creating opportunities, programming, and by giving programming, that opens up some funding envelopes that we can get from other places. People have money they want to give us to do the right programming because it appeals to their corporate checkbox or it's in the domain that they like to support. So with this additional programming, with making the effort to appeal and offer something to all demographics, we actually make it easier to run and easier to fund.
Exactly. And a question from Eric, and then I think we'll have to move on with our agenda, Scott and Kimberley. So over to you, Eric.
Thank you. I don't think I really have any specific questions, just a comment just to put in. I really think that this idea, Scott, we've spoken about it, and I've been really interested in seeing how this progresses over the last little while. I think it really ties together a lot of things that both the EDAC, the EDAC and a lot of other groups in the municipality are trying to accomplish. I think that this way of bringing people together and giving groups an opportunity to do their thing is going to be really important. Just thinking on the things that I'm engaged in, Scouts immediately pops to mind. And, just for groups like that are looking to grow their membership and engage the rest of the community and really bring people together, I think that having a platform like this, as Scott, you said, to be the facilitator for groups to really take things and run with it, and really kind of show their own uniqueness and bring people into Meaford and really show people what we're about. A big portion of kind of what has always drawn me to Meaford is, as a kid, I would attend the Christmas events, and I don't know if just being a Anglo and Saxon backgrounded person, if that's why Christmas is a big one for me, but even a lot of my friends that have sort of seen over the, just telling them about it and coming with me to Meaford to see things, have always thought it was something kind of interesting and unique, and always thought that it would be really interesting to see Meaford really take that and run with it and grow with it further. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think that a lot of things can come together in a very important way.
Really well said, Eric. And I think as a committee, I can see a lot of excitement amongst us about this event, and we really wish you all the best, and thrilled that Jennifer has stepped forward to offer her support. And I hope that you'll keep us in the loop, and as the planning process goes forward, and keep us informed, and let us know if there are other ways we can help. And I just want to leave you with one idea. A few years ago, when I was chairing Canada Day, we held soapbox derby races on Collingwood Street. We closed off Collingwood Street, and maybe there's a way to winterize that as an event for kids, because that was really starting to take off while while we at the Chamber were doing Canada Day. So just leave you with that thought, and thank you so much for your really enthusiastic and passionate presentation today, and look forward absolutely to following the progress of the market. So thank you, Scott and Kimberley, so much for being with us.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my pleasure indeed. So we'll move on with our agenda, and the second presentation is I'm looking for Evelyn, Paul, and Tehseen. Are they with us? Evelyn, Paul, and Tehseen are from MDB Insight, and we're going to have a presentation on regional economic and employment survey work that is underway for TC Energy's Ontario Pump Storage Project. So there's Paul, you're going to take the lead on this.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cavini. Nice to be here. Tehseen Rana is with me. Evelyn Paul is not. She did the heavy lifting in coordinating the meeting and is the project manager of this project, but she won't be joining us for this conversation. I will say that it was a pleasure to listen to the previous presentation and conversation. In a previous life before working as a consultant, I worked for a few municipalities as their economic development officer or their economic development manager. And in my longest stint, I worked for the County of Lennox and Addington, which is Napanee. It's one of those long Eastern Ontario counties that stretches from Lake Ontario up through to close to Algonquin Park, next to Hastings and Frontenac. But Napanee is about the same size as Meaford, and we had an advisory committee, much like this group that I'm speaking with today. And it was always so enjoyable for me to hear the passion and the interest of people trying to do great things for their community. So with that in mind, Tehseen and I are with MDB Insight, and we are a consulting firm that works primarily with municipalities across Canada, helping them with their economic development challenges and opportunities, and helping them deliver paths forward. On occasion, we work with other organizations, and in this case, this is TC Energy. Speaking of Napanee, actually, in 2014, TC Energy asked us to do a socioeconomic impact assessment of a new generation station that they were proposing at the time. Then they weren't TC Energy; they were TransCanada. But that generating station was a natural gas-fired electricity generating station, which is now in operation. And so fast forward 7 or 8 years, and TC Energy has asked us to help localize, I guess, provide some local context to the opportunities and challenges that the pump storage project provides, and the interest here is to speak with you and to get your input. I'm speaking a little long right now, but I'm going to walk through a quick presentation, and then the main goal here is to get your input. Both Tehseen and I had this time booked actually only until 4 o'clock. We've communicated, and Tehseen is going to stay with you at 4 o'clock, but I unfortunately will have to leave to join my other scheduled meeting. But you'll be in good hands with Tehseen, and it will be in the conversation stage at that point in time. So thank you. If you wouldn't mind moving the slide forward, please. Thank you very much. Agenda. Yeah, I'll just give a very brief presentation. Am I right, Deputy Mayor, Madam Chair, that you have seen these slides already? Have they been part of the agenda?
Yes, they are in our agenda. So yes, we will have seen them.
Okay, great. So I can go through probably a little more quickly than normal, and then we'll get into the discussion, which is really the most important part of this this meeting. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've been asked to sort of localize the project impacts, benefits, and challenges. There was a study done almost 2 years ago by a firm called ERM. Some of you may be familiar with that. I think it's locally known as the ERM report, and it did a great job in terms of identifying broader economic opportunities, indirect and direct impacts of the project. And I'm going to remind you of some of those in this presentation. But really, what we want to do is take those and identify how they impact people more specifically and businesses more specifically. Next slide, please. And so here's the project timeline. We're moving through and into essentially phase 3. I guess phase 2 and phase 3 are almost being done concurrently. We had a project start up, really defined our engagement plan with TC Energy, the people in the communities that are important to speak with, and have been doing a number of those engagements already. The phase 2 is looking more specifically at the costs and opportunities, the inputs of the project during the development phase, which is the phase that it's in now. It's being developed, and then also construction and operation. Phase 3 is looking at some of the more specific aspects. So we've been, for instance, we've had a meeting with some of your staff team at the municipality of Meaford to better understand how this project would affect specific services that you're providing, such as local roads. And then phase 4, of course, is report development and delivery, which we're starting to work on now, and we'll be working towards an April deadline with the qualification, a recent qualification that there'll be an annex added to the report in the summer months after we complete a more fulsome round of engagement with Indigenous communities. Next slide, please. So I'll just take a brief look at some of the consultation analysis to date. Next slide, thank you. So I'm sure you're familiar with the project, large-scale electricity generating station. Error on this slide, it's not 2,000 additional megawatts of electrical supply, it's 1,000 additional megawatts, but still puts it in a pretty significant category. And the project lifespan is expected to be approximately 50 years. Next slide. So how does the project fit with municipal strategic priorities? Well, there's a priority called growing our local economy, and you can see some of this data. This is from that ERM report, talking about the number of jobs that would be created directly by direct employment at the project, and then indirectly are the kinds of jobs that would be created because TC Energy is purchasing supplies or equipment. And you can even go one step further, induced, which we don't have on here, but induced jobs are the jobs that are created because of the employees spending their money in the local community. There's, probably it's fair to say that the most significant impact is within the construction phases of the project. Very large numbers of employees on site. And then during operations, the numbers of jobs comes down. Now, so not as significant on a 1 year basis, I suppose, but if we look at the total amount of GDP as it's stretched out, it's still extremely significant. Another municipal priorities around workforce development and around ensuring that as much of the opportunity stays local as possible, and then environmental stewardship and climate change. Now that's not a specific area of elaboration that we're taking. We're focusing more on the economic and socio side of things, but environmental stewardship certainly an important component, and we'd be interested in hearing comments that you might have on that front too. Next slide, please. So potential challenges and mitigations measures that regarding these priorities. So regarding the environment, we have turbidity of water, quality, fish habitat, acknowledgement of species at risk and potential damage to roads. In terms of the visual impact, we're talking, we've been discussing sort of hydro line, and some of those mitigation measures have already been addressed regarding the overground transmission lines. In terms of socioeconomic impact, certainly we know that in Grey County you have a fantastic employment rate. There are jobs available, and there's very strong employment. There aren't a lot of jobs available, so we can appreciate that project like this could add a little bit of stress to the economy on worker supply, and as it pertains to available housing, particularly through the construction phases of the project. Next slide, please. All right. So I'd love to we have 3 questions, I believe, and I'd love to begin this with you, sit through as much as I can before I have to go at 4 o'clock. But again, Tehseen is here and able to jump in. He's going to be taking notes while the discussion occurs, and it's actually quite useful that this is being recorded as well, so we can listen back at a later point in time. So, well, actually, just before jumping into the first question, are there any comments or questions on what I just presented? I'd be happy to address those.
Thank you, Paul, very much for the introduction and presentation. And I'd like to start with one thought. You suggested that there are potentially people here who would be looking for work, and the reality is that this area overall has the lowest unemployment rate in Ontario. So workforce is a huge issue for us. I'll go over to Jen to start, and then Eric.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to on one of the slides. You had mentioned environmental stewardship and climate change, and that wasn't part of the scope. But in terms of if we're looking at this from an economic development perspective, what can you just describe how they're envisioning that this is other than the green energy of the project itself, what the relationship is to the environmental stewardship component?
Sure, and well, we're not working on, Tehseen and I and Evelyn are not working on that. It's of course an important aspect to the overall project. I think we all know anymore that the pillars of sustainability are all intertwined, right? We have a socioeconomic, we have a social pillar, we have economic pillars, we have environmental pillars, and one clearly affects the other. The environmental sustainability, if it's not properly taken care of, it will affect economic potential of the community, whether it's regarding residential development, whether it's regarding tourism or other maybe more commercial aspects of the economy. So in that respect, Jen, we're interested in understanding how potential environmental impacts could impact the economy, and what kind of mitigation measures we might be able to take. On the other hand, on the positive side of things, we know that also in Grey County and surrounding counties like Bruce, there's a massive effort to grow the green energy economy and turn it into a real competitive edge. And a project like this potentially has the ability to add a lot of value to an economic driver that has a lot of great future potential.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, for now.
There'll be more. So Paul, did I understand from what you were saying that the construction of the project may look at that whole phase of things through a lens of green energy, that the actual construction will be focused on being as green and environmentally friendly as it can be, separate from the project itself, the pump storage?
I'm not really qualified to speak on how construction will occur on site. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that specific question, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so we'll go over to Eric next.
All right. So two things. I'm a little bit curious about how this project is going to help meet a forecasted demand when it expends more energy than it produces once it's created. So I'm a little bit, I've ever since hearing about this project, I've been at a bit of a loss for how it makes sense that way, especially when Ontario is already overproducing electricity. It seems, as far as I can tell, that we're doing okay on that front. If anything, we would just not be giving it away to other jurisdictions or other markets. But I don't know if you would be able to speak to that from an economic standpoint, or coming from an economic standpoint. But then my economic specific question is what you mentioned that there is 623 jobs during and then 75 long-term jobs. I'm curious what the long-term ones are as once the construction workforce is moved out. I understand that there's, I think it's 4 or 5 long-term actual facility related positions. Where does the other 70 come from?
Eric, both those questions, unfortunately, going to be very difficult for me to answer. I'm not an expert on the Ontario electricity industry and supply and demand when it comes to that. I know that there's an anticipated closure or decommissioning of the Pickering nuclear facility in the coming years, and that is going to leave a large gap for in the current supply. So that's my understanding, and that's pretty much as far as it goes. As for the sites, the site-specific expending more energy to create expending Y energy to create X energy, I don't know any of the facts with that in that respect, Eric. So I'm sorry about that.
And you might want to, as you present further on this project, it might be worthwhile revisiting that specific slide.
Revisiting which?
Well, the slide, it says, as you corrected it, it says 2000.
Yeah.
But then, I feel like it's kind of missing a very important detail about the actual productivity of the project.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So thanks for that, Eric. So let's just ask Paul.
But sorry, about the
Yeah.
70 long-term jobs. Could you speak to where those are coming from?
This is going to sound like I don't know anything about the project, but I don't know what would constitute the 70 workers. I know from experience working of being associated with other generating stations, like in Lennox and Addington County, long before the Napanee generating station, there was the Lennox generating station, and that site employed, I want to say 40 or 50 people, but then had other contracts associated with that. Those 40 or 50 people were operators, generally ensuring that the facility was running efficiently and safely. And I'm sure that there were people there 24/7 in that respect. And then contractors that did more on-site maintenance and upkeep of the facility. So that's my estimate as to how the numbers are generated in terms of the longer term employment.
And then to sort of add on to that, when it comes to the 23, from a preliminary analysis of what we have so far, it's going to be things like having a control room operator, a plant manager, people in hydrotech, operations supervisors, admin, and also looking at different kinds of engineers, including mechanical, electrical, and civil as well. Those are going to be among the 23 that are going to be directly being a part of that number when it comes to the operation phase, and then sort of being on more of Paul's comments when it comes to more of the indirect.
Okay, Eric?
I feel uncertain, but okay.
No, carry on, Eric, carry on.
I don't know. Maybe I'm having trouble reconciling like how 23 jobs is going to, if 23 are directly related to the operation of the project, I don't see how those 23 people coming in is going to generate 52 other positions within the community. I mean, if you guys are the consultants, I'm willing to take your word for it. I just don't quite see it based on the slides.
Well, I mean, in every industry has a multiplier effect, and some industries have, and a multiplier effect is essentially one job in this industry will create X jobs in the economy as a whole. Industries like manufacturing and like electricity generation have significant multipliers because the value of the payrolls are generally higher. And the needs for supplies and services are required for the community at large. So it's definitely not uncommon. These are from the ERM study, so we did not do the input-output GDP analysis from this, but it's certainly not uncommon to see multipliers of 3 or 4 in industries like manufacturing. So and a multiplier in this case of just a little bit over 2 from 23 to 52 is I'm not surprised by that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Eric. And I would just say on the job front, the number seems to be ever evolving from initially hearing 800 to 1,000, now 623, and I guess it is kind of a fluid number for the time being, but it is an ever evolving number. Evelyn. Oops, you're muted, Evelyn.
Okay. I appreciate, that you taking the time to come and talk to us, but I find I'm getting the same reaction that we're not really getting real data and real information. And so for an economic development committee where you want to know what's really is the potential impact and how can a community make use of it, the information is pretty fuzzy. I can see you have a whole lot of indirect jobs even with those 23. So there won't be really 23 physical bodies working at this particular plant. So it just would be more helpful if you're trying to be helpful, or if the company's trying to create some positive vibe for this kind of project here, to have some real figures. And it's better playing with real figures than what appears to be very confusing, constantly changing figures. So it doesn't leave much confidence in what you're hearing. So just, responding to that. Yeah, I know you're doing one piece of it, but around economic development, the kinds of things, there seems to be a lack of clarity. What benefits are there? So in terms of, impact on the local, this municipality in terms of the infrastructure, what kind of other options are there to assist the municipality with the constant push and stress on their infrastructure in just getting it built, and those jobs, and what programs other than the hooking up with all I saw from your slides is some relationship with the college to provide some training opportunities. So, it doesn't feel like a lot. Having been involved with the, diamond mines going up to Yellowknife, there was a much more straightforward, clear set of plans on how it would benefit and not benefit the Yellowknife community, just getting people in and getting people out and not having all the staff resources to get that initial work up and done. I just find unless you're going to provide some more specific information out of your work, I don't think it's going to be helpful. So all I'm recommending is that whatever work you do, that it gets a little bit more specific and user friendly. And we know it's not just Meaford. You're looking at the regional impact for Grey Bruce, because that's where you're going to get your catchment. But they were able to come up with, what kind of jobs, how kind of job shadowing, all sorts of things that they could do in various communities. And I'm not hearing any of that. And I don't seem to be hearing the questions that generate that either, in a very practical way for both our municipality as well as for the potential workforce. If you have all this need for interim accommodation, if that's one of the findings that you're going to need some interim accommodation, or, you're going to fly in because you're treating it like a Yellowknife environment. Where are these people going to stay? And what benefit, what opportunities are there for local people to come up with options? And it's those kinds of things that to me should be included in whatever you're doing. Because I don't see, from even the information you're generating from already supposedly analysis of information you've gotten, doesn't really hit to the heart of this in terms of economic development.
I appreciate that, Evelyn, and well said. And over to you, Paul, and then to Rob, because I think what we're needing here is a little bit of clarification, because we're just feeling right now that we're just not all on the same page here, we as a group, and you, Paul, and Tehseen, as to what it is you're actually looking for from us today. So I'll just turn it over to Rob Boyd, if I may, and perhaps, Rob, you can help us with that.
Thank you. Probably can't help by adding any more light onto it other than the question and maybe a bit of framing here. This is a difficult challenge for a number of reasons. Obviously, this project unto itself, its scale, how it gets approved, all the interrelationships, jurisdictions, politics, local cultural impacts, all that taken into account, we still have the issue of trying our best to deal with the various scenarios that are being presented in terms of the numbers. And again, I want us to always remember that, all these studies are, they are providing is potential scenarios of the future, right? They're not crystal balls. They can't define it down to a person, because there are so many different interrelated aspects that come into play. It's not unlike in the planning world when we're looking at population projections, right? They're not goals, they're projections of how the future may roll out. And as every day passes, they get that much less accurate, quite frankly, right? Because the world changes and there's circumstances there. But with all that, I very much, I'm listening quite carefully to all the questions that are being posed. And I think there's a lot of things there where I'm going to assume that the data is there. It just needs to be brought forward in a way that is helpful, particularly to this group and their activities. And I understand, obviously, that there are a lot of different stakeholders and audiences that you have to present that data to. But I think there's potentially some missing pieces that would probably help this group feel more confident in those projections. And some of that might be not so much about the numbers, but maybe some of it could also be how those numbers were generated, or the assumptions that they're based on, right? Because then we have an understanding of methodology, and then we have an understanding of, as things are changing, we can put our lenses onto it and as a group collectively come to some sort of common understanding of where this is leading, right? I don't think anyone is expecting a definitive list of exactly what the jobs are, where they're going to be, who's going to fill them, and what their work hours are, right? It's about having a general sense, and if we understand your methodology, I believe, speaking for myself, I'd have a better handle on where the gaps are related to the part of the world that I look at. And I'm going to assume that is similar to the membership of the committee here too. They will then be able to compare that to where their area of expertise is, and we'll come to some sort of common understanding.
That's very, very helpful, Rob. Thank you. And I think to pull it back, because it is such a big topic, and we know there are some gaps and some missing bits of information here. Maybe if we pull it down to talk about one thing that we know is very important to all of us, and that is the housing side of it. Is that of interest to the group to have a discussion about the housing, and where, from your perspective, Paul and Tehseen, that you see the interaction happening between TC Energy and the municipality, because we know we're going to need places for these people to live, and what are they going to look like, and how many, and what potentially your partnership is in that. So let's just have a little chat right now about the housing side of it, and then see if we get back on track. Okay, would anyone like to start on that? Reid.
If I may, Deputy Convener, I just want to ensure the group knows that we're not here to make suggestions on how these matters are resolved. Not yet. We are here to understand how the community is feeling about issues like housing, so that we can present options to TC Energy for them to consider and bring forward to the community as resolutions. So I want to make that sort of position better understood, perhaps.
Okay.
Thanks. And we'll take notes. Our questions were going to be around, what are the potential positive impacts? What are the potential negative impacts? And how can we maximize local economic opportunity out of those things? So picking them out issue by issue is fine. We'll make notes as we go along, but we would like to sort of get a cross section of responses related to those three aspects, if we could.
Okay, so the three aspects then for review: environmental and impacts on Georgian Bay, visual impact, social economic impact, those three? Or do we want to go back to the first question, growing our economy, workforce development, and environmental stewardship and climate change?
I think we were going to approach it a little bit more generally and just ask, what are the potential positive impacts of this project that are important to you? And then what are the potential negative impacts of this project that are important to you? And how can we mitigate against those potential negative impacts? So.
Okay, so thinking in terms of that question, Evelyn, you have your hand up.
Sorry. I feel like the naysayer, personally, with so little data, all you're asking is our general feeling about the project. So I don't know how you can get anything concrete from, our time here from the Economic Development Committee. If you're just wanting it because we're a general citizen who happens to live here, and what do we like and not like and whatever, I don't find that a useful use of my time around the economic development. I was hoping there would be some good questions around economic development, and aspects like the accommodation, those things would have been more appropriate. So that's my comment, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Rob, over to you to add to where we are.
Yes, thank you. Again, general concepts, but I think they're, you've asked them, and it's valuable that they sort of make it onto the record. Probably no big surprises in these. So if we look at, as we started this last section quickly about, housing, from what we can surmise on the scale of the project without the very specifics, we know the short term during construction housing could be, quite an issue. What'll help us on the planning end of things, and with that, I'm going to say it's all the community services that relate to that, everything from just capacity of roads to library access to all the soft kind of social implications, even though it's not directly within our control, but what are the impact to the school, right? So if we can get a sense of your expectation of what that let's say the demographic breakdown of the kinds of workers you'll have there, then we can from that surmise where they are in their life course and make some assumptions about if they're all, just going off the top of my head, if most of the workers are would happen to be engineers with 30 years experience, we're going to guess that they probably don't have young kids, right? They're in a different place in their life course. And so that means they don't come with the same size of family and, the way that spins out. So we need to understand who that workforce is so that we can then project other assumptions about that. Again, particularly that full range of services that impact the lives of people in the community, but then also so that we're prepared so that those sort of temporary friends and neighbors that will be part of the community, that is an enjoyable experience for everyone across the board, right? We need to look at how that doesn't have just a negative impact on that workforce. So something to consider there, again, relates to the data, but in a broader sense, so that we can go beyond just what the raw numbers are and who these people are.
Thanks, Rob. And one of the conversations we're having with labor unions in the area is understanding the degree to which the trades that are required can be filled locally, the degree to which they'll be filled regionally. In other words, people still able to drive to the site on a daily basis, and those that will need to be filled by those who live outside the region and are going to more likely require temporary accommodations. So that data collection's in the works and will be, I think, interesting to the questions and the questions you're asking now.
That pertains very much to the housing then, and what type and how much housing is required, as well as transportation concerns and childcare and so on. So, Eric?
Thank you. Yeah, so looking at potential negatives, but just looking at your slides with the first set of questions. I mean, yeah, I think that this project, it's assuming everything goes great, and promises are fulfilled and things like that. I think that I mean, by any measure of adding jobs and things like that, I mean, sure, that definitely contributes to workforce development. I mean, if the project really is objectively verifiable as being more green and sustainable than it seems, then those goals for the community are definitely being advanced. But I think each of those sort of facets also plays into a lot of the negative concerns that the community has, especially with things like housing. If we have a huge rush of workers basically come in, my big concern is kind of like a bubble effect. If we inflate everything, we inflate all of our services, all of our restaurants hire on staff, all of our restaurants go through expansions because they've had 3 great years and they're expecting to have another great 4th year. And then by year 5, all those workers leave, and now everybody has more infrastructure and more investment than they're really able to sustain. That can go with housing, that can go with basically all aspects, even if the municipality brings on staff to help deal with the project or extra road workers or something, that would be a big concern. And I mean, ultimately up to individuals to make their decisions. But if we at least kind of know what to expect from that, then that could be good. But with infrastructure changes like adding housing and things, those are irreversible. So we have to make sure that those things are being properly accommodated. And then, of course, the environmental impacts would be a big concern, I think, to the entire community. I think it's hard, at least to my view, it's hard to make a case for environmental stewardship when you're filling destroying Niagara Escarpment and then filling it with concrete. I mean, it's unusable right now, but at least it's being stewarded for the most part. And to make the case that this is in any way environmental stewardship, I think is a hard thing for TCE to do. So I think for myself, and I think most of the community, that would be a serious concern.
Yeah. Are there any ways to, thank you, Eric, are there any ways to mitigate against those? Those are some pretty significant concerns that you have. Like, can things be done with the existing or with the future project to lessen the impacts of those things?
Well, yeah, if you're thinking looking at it from a land stewardship perspective, I mean, once it's full of concrete, I don't know what else could really happen.
Right,
I mean, nothing
okay.
can grow there. So it's basically I can't remember the size, but a couple multi-acre desert. And it would be hard to go in and sort of replant or at least use it in some way that would allow the community to experience nature, because it's on an active military base. So there isn't really much that can happen. At least now it's acting as a carbon sink. At least now there's relatively old growth at this point. The land has been cut off from the rest of the world for 80 years or so. So we've got at least 80-year-old trees sitting on it, which is a massive thing for carbon sinking. But to just clear it and burn all that diesel to do so and to dig that hole, I don't know how that could possibly be mitigated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Janet?
Thank you. I was going to connect that I'm conscious of time because our agenda and our meeting is starting to wind down. But for Paul and Tehseen, you've heard a lot of input from EDAC today, and I think you heard that there's some more information being of understanding the project and that in order to respond from the economic side of things. Is there opportunity, like what is the next steps for you folks and potentially providing some of those, addressing some of those questions or taking some of that information and then being able to bring that back to the committee at a future time?
We're in the, I guess, information data collecting process for the next several weeks. So any kind of feedback that individual committee members may have, we're happy to receive it. If they'd like to do that through, I'm sorry, I don't know the channels with the municipality, maybe through you, Janet, or whomever. If there's some written responses that want to be provided, that would be great to receive. Either Tehseen, Evelyn, or I could be available for a phone conversation if a committee member wants to have that opportunity too. So by all means, make that outreach. There hasn't been a plan put in place for us to be back in front of the Meaford, your committee, but we have a plan to be in front of Meaford Municipal Council at the end of the project. I hazard to say that if there's a desire to be back to this committee before going to council, then bring that forward and it'll be discussed with TC Energy and how they want this project to roll. I think ultimately I know ultimately they want the community to feel like they have had their chance to identify concerns, identify opportunities to mitigate against the concerns that can be mitigated against. So I think I obviously can't speak for them, but I think there would be some openness to that kind of consideration.
And that's helpful, Paul, because I think one thing we're realizing that's missing here today is communication between your group and TC and, and us as committees and the residents in general. The opportunity to participate in what you're doing, I think, is important for this community. So if I'm hearing you saying that if any of us would like that one-on-one phone call, that you and Evelyn and Tehseen would be open to that. So perhaps if we could be provided a contact to arrange those times with you, that would be useful to the members of this committee. And back to you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple things that I'll just kind of leave on the table for consideration. From a planning perspective, to be most prepared for whatever the future outcome might be, I have to go under the assumption that this is going to take place, right? It does no value in not being prepared for that scenario, right? Because of the time lag it involves in terms of, let's just take housing, for example, having an understanding that even the simplest housing project of any meaningful scale, so something more than just a small row of townhomes or anything, if that goes smooth as glass, lickety split, that's a 5-year process, right? That's, so any kinds of significant numbers of impact of need for housing, we're going to have a handle on what that might be, because that has implications on our overall projections and understanding who's coming to the marketplace. Not that we can make people build houses. It's not our business. We have no control over that. But I need to then know that maybe we're leading towards, at some future year where those lines start to cross, that there's a greater demand that is just not coming to the table, not being built, isn't in line for approvals, et cetera, and what the implications of that are, right? That's the kind of stuff that I need to look at, right? Let's just make up a number. Imagine if you said that we needed in 7 years 200 homes, right? Just making things up. If by year 4, I don't see that we have approvals for those 200 homes, I sure know that I can't have the infrastructure, the roads, and the houses built in the next 2 to 3 years to meet that demand, right? And it's not an on-off switch. It's not that they all show up one day, but also you don't build these things in one day. So that's the kind of stuff that I need to be thinking of in terms of, regardless of where we or where I might stand in terms of if I think this is a great project or not, or don't care, I need to be prepared for, if it becomes real, how does that impact the built form, the services that we have, the roads, the housing, et cetera, the park space, all that kind of stuff. And on that, I'm more than happy to have multiple conversations if this needs to be, and I'll just put it out there, but I'll have to confirm through the CAO and council if there's some sort of strange process I'm not aware of, but I'll put it out there that I could make myself and staff available, on a, let's call it a bi-monthly basis or whatever, if necessary, to help work through some of that. I think that's easily within my mandate for what development services needs to do in preparation. We're going through our OP update right now. This needs to be considered, as part of that. I'm saying that just so that we don't have to rely on less frequent meetings if we have to sit down and get some work done. So I'll put that out there.
That's really great, Rob. And, and as you talk about that detail with planning, and you think the business community also needs to be aware, and in terms of what they need to do to ramp up. And I think we also have to look at the attraction of people in the workforce to make this happen. And what does that involve? And does that include newcomer attraction, and what programs need to be in place to support potential newcomers? And chances are many of them may be immigrants to Canada, and we want to make sure that they're welcomed and comfortable here. And what do we as a municipality need to have in place to make that happen? It is a very complex undertaking, and I think all of that plays into where we're potentially headed here. So I think Rob's absolutely right. These conversations have to be ongoing from step to step, baby steps, and just what has to happen at each level, and making sure again that all the communication is in place, that we're talking to each other as we go through this, so that we can do what we can to prepare, and that you can help us understand what's needed. So would anyone else like to comment before we move on? Janet, did you have your hand up, Janet? No? Okay. Okay, so I guess, Reid, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd just like to add to Rob's comment that the numbers, even though they're an estimated number, is really critical. So you can't plan houses if it's just a tentative number of full-time workers that are going to be there forever. So it's all hinged together, whether we're talking housing, we're talking the multiplier effect, how many people are going to be in the community, like the accuracy of the numbers are really critical to the actual outcome of Rob's planning. So I don't know if that helps or hurts, but when we think about pump storage, I guess we're using Ludington as the template, but you had mentioned Paul Napanee, and certainly we have a generator in Eugenia that's a lights out generator. So, I mean, is it possible that this could be a lights out facility that somebody comes around once a week and looks at? Like, can it be run all off, off someone's computer somewhere else? Like, we don't know that. And those are the kind of critical decisions that we would need to know, whether it's 3 people or 50 people or 70 people. So I'm not sure that I'm very helpful, but I just want to flag that.
Good point, Reid. Any other comments from the group at this point in time? So I think what we're saying, Paul and Tehseen, is that we'll be looking for further feedback from your group and keeping us in the loop, so to speak, and with the option of further conversations with the both of you. Okay. And any last words from you, Paul and Tehseen?
I'd like to say thanks for the time and for the input. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope
Hey,
it's
everyone.
helpful. Thank you both very much. Okay, so we'll move on with our agenda. Next, number 5A would be approval of the minutes from our December the 8th meeting. And I'll ask for a mover and seconder to put that on the table. By mover Rob and a seconder Eric, thank you. And is there any discussion of those minutes? Evelyn. I'm sorry, Evelyn, you're muted. I know.
Okay. Just the minutes are great in terms of the information. So Janet, there's no issue about what the content is. But it struck me, and I'll let Reid talk to his because he raised it as well. We might want to tag team this, Reid. Just reading, yeah, okay, you go.
Ahead. Well, as I reviewed the minutes, Evelyn's right. I mean, they're accurate, but there's things embedded in the minutes that were discussed and brought forward at the committee, such as the communication report last time was very good. And there's a number of questions that kind of resulted as a result of that. Is there going to be a separate one for business? Is there going to be a separate one for individuals, residents? We asked for it to be on this agenda, and it's noted in the minutes. As we go on, we asked for, can we discuss work plan, and can we bring economic development people in to discuss to this group and sort of to enable us to get a a strong work plan in place. And it just seems to be that, we have an agenda that came out that kind of didn't reflect where we thought we were kind of moving as a group. And I mean, they're both topics that are very, critical. I think that the Christmas market, you got to do it when it's available. TC Energy, yes, I mean, they're critical too. But if we can't deal with what the group as its whole wants to deal with, I'm not sure either we don't have enough meetings, or we're not putting the resources at it that needs to, or we need to spread them out somehow. And so I just leave it at that.
Thank you, Reid. Did you want to add anything to that, Evelyn?
I just say that the committee, when you read our minutes, the committee is being used to comment on things that are going on corporately, which, that's valid. But things in terms of working on the things that the committee has asked and they want to work on just seems to go by the board. It's as if that just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed and not being dealt with. So, the reality is, if the municipality wants to see this committee as just a feedback committee on whatever's going on corporately, that's one function. If you really want to move ahead with economic development in a very strategic way, if we don't actually begin to spearhead it, and if resources aren't added to help us do that, it's not going to move from there. It's not going to move to that. And we're not going to really have a focus on economic development per se. All you're getting is some input from people who are within the business community who, can comment on all these other corporate projects. But you're not really going to end up at the end of the day having and being able to say that Meaford is really moving ahead with a strong economic development approach. So I think it's not the minutes per se. It's what is interesting is that it's a trend that Reid and I have seen when you look at what's in the minutes, and where the committee, has talked about this work plan back for quite a few minutes, but the minutes, the formal minutes, well, that's been happening for months. And so nothing has moved forward, and we are not listening to any other people. To me, the staff, there isn't sufficient staff resourcing to help Janet, or for Janet to have the time, because I know she wears multiple hats. But in other scenarios, there is a staff resource that helps the Economic Development Committee move on and do some of those things. So if it's to arrange speakers, if it's to get businesses, those suggestions were made by different folks in the committee about, getting some of the businesses to come and talk to us about some of their plans or not plans. None of that's happening. And it's all like for information. And it's like our ideas are, well, those are all ideas and information, as if it's for some other project. So I don't know. That's why I think Reid and I just wanted to talk about this, about what really are our minutes indicating that we're doing as an Economic Development Committee. We're fundamentally just acting as a sounding board for corporate projects. That's our, and I don't know how the rest of you feel, but that is my sense. And I have concerns because I don't think the Economic Development Committee is helping ready us for the next stage of having a more clear plan. And to develop that plan, we needed to listen and talk to our own businesses and maybe have some other speakers here about other strategies that other municipalities have used. And, and anyway, so to speak to that, I mean, I also, my son is just in the process of starting 5 more businesses that are all multi-million-dollar businesses, and he's set up business offices in a community the size of Meaford. And I think it's good to listen to people like that from that side, as well as from those that plan from the other side. So what is it that's going to make Meaford attractive? What are all the elements that we need to look at, and then out of listening to all those things, move forward? So that's my added piece to what Reed was talking about.
And I appreciate that, Evelyn and Reed, and you're right, we did talk about that at our last meeting and prior meeting, was the direction of the committee, and moving forward and preparing that work plan so that there would be a solid footing in place for the group after the next election. We did have that conversation for sure. Rob.
I'm going to let, Janet, I think, wants to respond to something to that regard. So I'm going to let her go first, because it ties into this a little bit, and I just wanted to bring something else up, but I'll let Janet go first.
Thank you, Rob. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on this because this is obviously great feedback, and it's obviously important that this committee feels that they are successful in what they are doing and providing. I think we have to realize that this is an advisory committee. So you are supporting an advisory to council. We have talked about what things would be priorities to help move economic forward that would help staff. And as you all know, staff, you're looking at the staff that's trying to do that stuff and pulling it forward and trying to be as efficient as possible for that. So there's certainly, opportunities for me to continue to come back and talk to you guys about what we're working on or where things are at. But I also want to recognize that in the last couple of meetings, there's us working on the work plan where you've talked about the work plan, and that's not fallen to the side. There's been, the last couple of meetings have been packed with items such as today where it comes up and the timing has been such that this comes first. So if we've talked about the official plan stuff and having NPG at one of our meetings and things like that, those things we've tried to accommodate that based on the time sensitivity to bring them in here. And you're right, we have 6 meetings a year. That's what's been approved through council in the terms of reference for this committee to meet monthly for an hour and a half. So in that time of what we talk and what we bring into this meeting, certainly economic development, what's really interesting about this particular group is that so many things fall under economic, and so many projects within that's happening in our community right now touch those avenues of what are interest to this committee, and trying to bring those in, as well as bringing folks in, as you talked about wanting to have Cyril come in. I mean, that's still of an interest to bring into these meetings. It's just a matter of trying to time those agenda items with the time that we have available. So I'll leave it at that one for now.
Thanks, Janet. Rob?
Okay, and that kind of ties in, because, and you're right, Evelyn, and Reed, I agree, because it depends on what kind of a macro or micro level we're talking about. I mean, that conversation about TCE was extremely macro, relevant, but extremely, high in the sky stuff. I had 2 things today I was hoping just to mention very quickly that are on a very micro level, but for me, on an economic development platform directly related to businesses in town, I thought were extremely relevant. If I may, one was Christina Sheardown. So Meaford Chamber, we presented a check, Meaford Dragons, for her participation with Rotary. There was a conversation ensued because she said that she's having extreme difficulty. She was hoping to get into Chez Gilles' location, and is having great difficulty because the contract was very onerous. Why? And we're not here to talk about trying to get between a landlord and a tenant relationship, but why it was relevant was because she also talked about trying to pivot over to where Papa V's was, sorry. And there was a problem there being about something about her business model didn't fit, and they were hoping to get another pizza place in there. The ensuing conversation became ironically that all 3 properties were owned by one tenant, And I brought this up at BIA this morning with Councillor Bell. And my question to this committee was going to be, and to staff and to you, Deputy Mayor, was going to be, is there any kind of potential punitive measures that can be addressed with landlords in town that do keep buildings empty long term? So from an economic development standpoint, that micro problem is just a precursor to long-standing problems of other potential landlords that can come into town and keep empty buildings going, and what can we do about it? That is a real concern, and that's the kind of thing. And again, like I said, that's extremely micro, but to me, from an economic development, it's very, very important to what our downtown core looks like and what the net result is going to be. The second point was that Maggie and Dix also complained heartily this week to Chamber. I know I'm bringing a Chamber hat into this because she was trying to do something with the outside, with the facade of the building they wanted to paint, and they were told by staff that they can't. They'd have to sandblast it first. The net result of the conversation being is that there is a retail tenant who was extremely dissatisfied with the potential of trying to actually beautify something in downtown, which is something we want to happen as well. So from an economic development, that's long-term, but also just the latitude that can be taken with those kind of environments to make sure the staff are handling those in a way that is obviously trying to make sure that the vendor is being taken care of in a way that's conducive to not making them happy, but making sure that they're listening to that problem and addressing it. So those are, again, macro, micro problems. What are we dealing with on a regular meeting basis? Kind of, I get a little confused where we are in the weeds, because these are problems that are real to us, but don't get discussed. And we talk about these really high level problems that we cannot impact. So, or very difficult to impact. So that's just my 2 cents on it as well.
And appreciate that, Rob. And I will share with you, because you brought the two Christines forward, that I did meet with Christine at Maggie and Dix, and I have talked to Rob Armstrong, and there is a resolution upcoming for that facade. So I think that is now coming to a positive outcome. And I did also talk to Rob about Christine Sheridan and her dilemma. And I'm not exactly sure where that is standing now, but I did make him aware of it. And I do agree that a conversation with that landlord is in order to try to encourage a meeting of the minds, so to speak, to help Christine. We'd really love to see that wine bar on our main street. So I thank you, Rob, and I was aware of those, and I think I've got one solved, and I'm working on the other one. That's helpful at all. And back to then, I think what we're really discussing here is how we'd like to see our agenda at an upcoming meeting. So certainly Janet and I have both heard your thoughts that we would like to get back to talking about the work plan that we agreed to do, and to potentially bring in Cephas as a speaker, or if he's not available, to look at potentially Evelyn's son or someone else who could talk to us with some ideas. And so am I seeing some agreement in that we'd like to see our next agenda structured in that manner. And we'll see what else comes up in the meantime, whether there's any update from the folks that we talked to today from MDB, and see what else comes forward. Can I vote for some consensus? Is that more or less what we'd like to see on our next upcoming agenda? Perhaps some nods, and Janet, would you speak to that, please?
I just want to highlight too for the agenda. So the agenda this isn't something that's put together solely by staff. So if committee members have an item that they want to bring forward for discussion or decision or presentation, identify that and bring that forward to your chair, deputy mayor, as a chair, because the finalization of that agenda goes through a process with staff before that gets finalized and sent out to the public. So just as another note, this is not just as a staff, we find stuff to put it together. This is a collaborative, this is the committee.
And thanks very much for that, Janet. So All of that being said in relation to the minutes, could I now ask that we accept the minutes then as presented? We have, is anyone opposed to doing that? Thank you. And really appreciate that good discussion. No items for consideration or for information. Are there committee inquiries? Anything anyone else would like to bring forward at this point in time?
I'd like to just suggest that, following up Rob's thing, is that I think observations from the community in terms of the business community should be an ongoing item on our agenda. I don't know what we want to call it, but I think that kind of thing, which, yes, it sounds nitty gritty, but some of those things might lead us to the broader things that need to be resolved, or some plan needs to be put together. So I think a more focused things on, I think, Rob, as you put it, is so it's not as nefarious and up there, but some things that can actually be, we can begin to put some parameters around will be more helpful in the designing of the agenda.
I agree, Evelyn. And the reason I brought it up is because it does kind of point to what can become long-term or systemic issues.
Right.
And even though they're very isolated incidents, they can point to a larger required solution. So that's kind of why I even bring it up, because they do seem rather small in scale, but they're indicative of other issues. So if we can, and to your point, Janet, because these things come up literally last minute to us often, that agenda is already set a week ago. So it was already too late by the time that agenda was set to try and add it, unless there's a vehicle in place to kind of add it in between there. And that's where Evelyn's point of maybe being able to do something as a catch-all within the meeting to address things like this might be required. I don't know.
And I think number 8, committee inquiries, kind of encompasses that, Rob, that we can bring forward anything like this that you want to discuss. So no, I'm glad we had that conversation today. Rob, and then Janet. Rob Voigt, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, as part of the terms of reference for this the ACTEV advisory committee, that's one of the things is about that continuous work and collaboration with staff and council and local partners to kind of bring up the positive community image as well as moving a business forward. I think that last point that Rob made in terms of that these examples or stories can highlight a condition that may speak to a process or a policy or a regulation that is causing challenges, right? Sometimes it's just the circumstance of that one thing. Sometimes it's an indicator of other things, right? So from the development services department, that's where the advisory nature of the committee to provide insights on that is particularly helpful. That circumstance you were talking about, that relates to a heritage district issue, right? And so without diving straight into what are the challenges with the heritage district, which would be dealt with that advisory committee, there's maybe another piece there for this committee that might make your work program, your longer term work program, to remind, information piece, let's say, to remind landlords and businesses that they're in this thing called the heritage district and there's rules around that, right? So that's where the two advisory committees overlap geographically, and the businesses are doing their thing, and then you're each tackling the challenge from your area of expertise, right? So I think that kind of idea of an ongoing, small portion of your agendas as a forum for folks to bring up ideas, questions, challenges might be a great way to be able to look at this as kind of an acupuncture kind of approach. It's like, hey, what's that thing? How do we tweak it before something becomes a big issue? It's not going to be a place where people can come and make complaints and have issues resolved, right? We have process for that, but this would be a way to coordinate that and then feed that back to council, who might, let's say, suggest that whatever that issue was goes up to council with advice, and then it comes back to, as a council directive to the planning department to make an adjustment to the Heritage District plan, right? That could be a thing, right? And that's the way it kind of loops around and comes back, right?
And to me, that speaks very much again to a topic we've addressed many times in the past, and it comes down to communication. And you're absolutely right, Rob, and I agree with you 100%. And I think in this case, for example, and I'm not sure how, because the landlord or the tenant in that case, it's incumbent upon them as well to try and obviously find out from the town what they can do. But by the same token, having knowledge of what that heritage district is, what's available. You know, CHIPS was, has been in place for a couple of years. Does she know about it? That kind of thing. So communication, again, we just talked about, is so key to all business communities, so that they're aware of what's going on, because these things do fall through the cracks, obviously.
Yeah, and there are things, it's things like the heritage plan. I mean, this is legislation that we're talking about, right? These staff doesn't just make up rules based on the day of the week or what they had for lunch. My wife and I actually run a property management business. We've got we do some property management folks out in Wasaga Beach, and we know what it's like to provide that information to potential tenants, right? So there is an onus, and I think it's only appropriate to have a strong business community that the owners of these buildings have to take interest in what they're doing. I can explain the rules to you, but I can't understand them for you, quite frankly. And that is another message, perhaps, that needs to be put out there, that to have a strong economic engine in the community that is particular, talking now about the downtown, means that we need to have engaged landlords, engaged businesses. We can't always just rely on the leasers or the leasees of this. We need the owners to be involved, and I'm not saying that's an easy thing, but it is something that we have to address, because unfortunately, like what you're talking about now, it's that end user of the space that feels the pain of not having been informed of that, right?
So what can we do now, Rob? Because we've got Christine Sheardon, a 20-year chef, Red Seal chef, experienced, who wants to open a wine bar. Between Rob, Janet, and you, Rob Boyd, and our committee, what can we do to help her get into one of these locations?
I don't know the specifics about that. I can say that we can go through, like, whatever processes we have, we run them as efficiently as we can. There are limitations in terms of what can be done when it comes to amending, changing a heritage building. I think the broader perspective is there, and we are right now updating the heritage plan. The broader implication of that, and this is something where I don't know if this has ever happened, or if we can, Margaret might be able to answer this, where perhaps we need to have two committees coming together, quite frankly, Heritage Advisory Committee and ECDEV, because you can treat the purpose of having a heritage district, and the legislation, everything talks about that it is as so that you're a steward and managing that resource. There's two ways of looking at that you truly are a steward and you are dealing with the evolution of it, or you can look at it as if you're curating a museum piece, right? Somewhere between those two is the right place to be for this community. And perhaps there are some things that we are too strict on, and again, it's up to the community and specifically council and the committee to determine that. And there's other things maybe we're not strict enough. It sounds like, where I can surmise where this conversation came from, there's probably something there where we're feeling like it's too strict. And then, so what does that mean? I can't arbitrarily just waiver from what the rules are. I can't supersede what the committee says and our interpretations are. So maybe there's a piece of work here where there needs to be some better alignment on what the expectations are. Only by virtue of showing where there is some confusion. It's not at all about the decision, but I'm sure you're aware of the what is it? I think it's Value Buds. Their sign was suggested, and there was the discussion around it was, well, we don't like black signs. Well, I went out, and on that side of Sykes Street and the 2 blocks that it sits on, if I'm not mistaken, I counted either 8 or 6 signs that are black. Right. So there's some inconsistencies only just because we're dealing with this kind of structure, right? Just like yourselves, volunteer committee, overworked in so many different ways, trying to do a lot of things. If we don't have the processes in place that make it smooth, we get goofy hiccups. And so maybe this is a question for the deputy mayor to figure out with Margaret and others. Can we bring 2 committees together at the same time to just have a constructive meeting? Maybe that would help.
It sounds like a great idea, Rob.
It is a good idea, and maybe some of this discussion can happen through the OP process as well. And just quickly, the Value Bud sign, really it was seen as being 3 signs. The sign at the top and then 1 in each window. It really is just, it's just a lot of signage was part of the concern there. So no, I think that's really good input, Rob, and I look forward to furthering that discussion and maybe talking offline with you as to how we can help Christine Sheardon and see if we can get that wine bar open. So is there anything else through, go ahead, Rob.
Just, yeah, and that one was definitely much more, it falls into the heritage purview and under kind of an aesthetic view. The other one I really saw being more of an upstream scenario where it truly is whether, and this is staff recommendation to council and council ultimate decision, but whether truly landowner in town having 3 empty buildings, whether there are punitive conditions that can be applied to at least trying to encourage them to do something about that. It's one thing, and I know once upon a time, I believe we even had some kind of a relief package in place for those people because the economy was different at a different point in time, and you totally get that. Where we are now is a totally different time frame and a totally different element. So to have those people skate on potential vacancies seems to be unfair at best for the town and do fall totally under the purview of economic development because it may be an inhibitor or an obstacle. So that's where, to me, that is why I want to bring it to the plate of staff and then hopefully council about what can be done to that regard for landlordism.
And it is a concern, Rob, because we do have one of the buildings where the services have been turned off and they can't get turned back on again without inspections, and they won't pass inspections. So that building is going to sit empty no matter what. And relief does come into that for taxation purposes. So that is something that has been discussed at council. And hopefully with these other 2 locations being viable, that we can support someone who's interested in one of those in some fashion so that a deal, so to speak, can be made. I'll definitely continue working on that, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there anything else that we'd like to bring forward in the committee inquiries? And if not, I see the date of our next meeting is set for April 20th. And I think we have a sense of what our agenda is going to look like for that meeting. So I want to thank everyone. We are way past our timeline today, but I really, really appreciate the very honest and thorough and good discussion that was had today. Thank you all for that. And thank you, Janet, for leading us and for all the work that you do. And wish all of you to stay safe and well. And we'll see you again on the 20th of April. And I guess we do need to formally adjourn the meeting. So can I have a mover and seconder to adjourn this meeting? Rob and Eric, thank you very, very much. Okay, enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.